have one item for board's consideration. An additional action item was transferred to the People and Performance Committee due to potential conflict of interest. But before we get to the other recommendation, I would like to ask Chief Financial Officer John Thomas to provide an update on TVA's financial condition. As Bill noted, I expect John to have some very positive things to say here. This is to me, it's a very happy report. So John, tell us the story.
Thank you and good morning. So the financial performance for the full fiscal year 2016, I'll begin with overall net income for the year, the highest net income in TVA's history at $1.2 billion. And at the same time, we actually reduced our effective rate year over year from 6.9 cents to 6.7 cents. And I think these items are critically related. Is the improved financial performance for TVA directly results in benefits that flow through to our customers. Sometimes they're seen as mutually exclusive, but in our business model, they're critically linked. As well as the efforts that we've talked about in terms of our overall O&M reductions. Bill mentioned the fuel savings of $1 billion, but $800 million of overall O&M reductions that help drive this favorable net income performance. All of the money that was generated through this has gone into debt reduction as well. So the favorable performance goes directly into debt reduction that resulted in $229 million of favorable interest expense that also has helped drive lower rates for our customers. So overall, I'd say financially for the year, very pleased with the results and a lot of hard work from the employees at TVA that went into that. I'll talk a little bit about weather. Obviously, weather's a big driver for us, and you've heard me talk most of the year about the challenges we had for the winter. Very mild winter this year, second mildest in the last 55 years. In the end, it looks like an average year if you look at the total statistics, but we ended up with one of the hottest summers, the warmest overall in the last 55 years, with 73 days above 90 degrees. So long, extended heat throughout the summer. We ended up, as I said, kind of an average year from a total combined heating and cooling degree days, but obviously two extremes on each end of that. And so that led overall, from a revenue perspective, you can see we were slightly down, $138 million. The base revenue underneath this was positive, but the fuel expense was down for the year, and that's what drives your overall effective rate down. You can see the fuel and purchase power expense, $316 million favorable. The total O&M, $77 million favorable. That's where we exceeded what we had planned for reductions in O&M. And I mentioned the interest expense. So overall, $641 million favorable in terms of our net income, and $122 million favorable to last year. In terms of the statement of cash flows, $3 billion of operating cash flow this year. So that favorable net income, all that flows right through to cash benefits of $410 million favorable in total cash from operations. This was a large investing year. Bill mentioned the number of projects that we had underway. So $3.1 billion of capital investment, but because of the favorable operating results, we borrowed almost $500 million less than what we had planned to borrow. We came into the year with a favorable position, so $776 million worth of favorability in terms of our overall debt position. So the summary here is lower rates for our customers, driven by lower expenses, lower debt, and higher net income. So pretty much all of the financial metrics moving in the right direction. And if you kind of back up from this and say, you know, how does TVA look from a track record perspective, I think what you're seeing are the benefits from a good, well thought out strategy that we put in place 4 years ago We've aligned our business plans around achieving that strategy. And in the performance expectations, Bill mentioned the winning performance and the long-term executive incentives, where you align our performance expectations to exceed the overall plan we put in place. And those are the key elements that drive long-term performance. And you can see that we've driven our rate down from 6.9 cents to this year's plan of 6.6 cents. You back up 1 year from that, it was 7.2 cents in FY11. So that's where you get to almost a 10% reduction in our rates. If you look to the top right, you can see that from an O&M perspective, relative to top quartile in the industry, we've gone from a 76% gap down to a 27% gap, driven by that $800 million reduction in O&M. And then at the bottom right, you can see TVA started this plan with the lowest fuel cost in the industry, and we've continued to drive that down to $19 a megawatt hour because of the reshaping of the portfolio as well as the improved performance of the fleet. So what you get is the lowest fuel costs in the industry with the most balanced portfolio in the industry that mitigates the volatility for our customers as well. And then lastly, what you see is we've invested $19 billion, both in terms of maintenance capital, but the new projects that we've built, like Watts Bar 2 and the combined cycle plants, and overall reduced our debt by $300 million. So I think a good track record of performance here. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
A publicly owned utility, I'd run out and buy some of your stock. Great report.
Thank you.
The next item, John, has to do with the TVA's tax equivalent payments.
Yes, sir. So the TVA makes in lieu of tax payments, and so I have really two items contained within the tax equivalents that I'm requesting today. One is approval of the final payments for fiscal year 16, and to authorize us to make the estimated payments for fiscal year 17. And so just as a reminder, TVA pays 5% of its revenues in lieu of taxes. These tax payments are paid out based off a formula, and that formula takes 50% of the book value of the assets in any particular state and 50% based off of the power sales in any particular state, and that formula derives the allocation of that 5% of our revenues that's distributed. And so this chart shows you the trend, and so our in lieu of tax payments are obviously impacted by our revenues, as I said, and so for 2016, almost $10.7 billion in revenue that resulted in $535 million in lieu of tax payments. And then for 2017, you can see that as our revenue goes down, you can see a slight reduction overall to 517 of estimated payments. We have looked at the board's request several times to understand the amount of taxes that TVA pays. A lot of times people say, oh, TVA doesn't pay traditional taxes. The taxes that we pay in lieu of taxes are very comparable to what you would see when you aggregate all the forms of taxes that other companies would pay. Much of that is made up in corporate income taxes that goes back to the federal government. All of these tax payments that TVA makes goes directly back into the valley. And so I would request of the board the approval for paying the final in lieu of taxes for fiscal year 16 and the estimated taxes for 2017. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I think it's very nice that our taxes go to the states we serve rather than shipped out to Washington. Great thing to have happen. The committee has reviewed this item and recommends approval of the payments for fiscal years 16 and the estimated payments to be made fiscal year 17 as set forth by John. And therefore I move the resolution's approval, even though I would like to see Kentucky get a bigger slice of it.
Do we have a second? Omitting the part about Kentucky. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the item behind tab 6? All in favor? 5 and 6. Had a little trouble reading here. All in favor of approving the item we did. All those opposed? Opposed? None. The item's been approved. Let's start to lose our reading.
Management has also briefed the committee on procedural steps associated with the board's review of asset allocation changes in the pension system. And that's one of the things we worked on quite a lot in recent time is getting the pension system headed in a better direction. The committee is satisfied that the process presented by management would give the board an adequate process to review asset allocation. Finally, the committee reviewed its charter and annual agenda. We do this each year at the time to determine whether we are focusing on devoting the right amount of time to each area where the committee has oversight responsibility. Each of the committees engage in a similar governance review. Let me conclude my report by again acknowledging TVA's positive financial report. We challenge you to continue your trajectory for the benefit of those we serve. That concludes the report of the Finance, Rate, and Portfolio Committee.
Thank you for that excellent report, Dee.